Ephesians 2, verse 10. For we are God's workmanship, created in Christ for good works, which God has prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. For we are God's workmanship, created in Christ for good works, which God has prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. How amazing is that? We are God's workmanship. His hands have been all over us. Workmanship, translated in Greek, is poema. That's where we get the term poem in our English language. You show me a great poem, and I will show you an author who took great pain in making sure that the cadence of his poem was done in a certain way, that the timing was just right, that words were switched or placed perfectly where he designed them to be, so the point, so the emotion, so everything can be in place to get the results that author wanted. It's not as simple as green eggs and ham. Selectively placed words. God, our God, is a God of detail. Jeremiah 1, verse 5. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. There's God in our lives, putting words where he wants them, putting the cadence where he needs it, putting his hand on our soul. Who we are, the way we are. God made me the way I am. So I'm not going to apologize to any of y'all. There's verse after verse after verse. I could go all day long about how God has his hand in us before we were born, why we were there, before we accepted Christ. His hand is through the whole thing. I get very frustrated because I love watching the Discovery Channel, and I'm watching these things, and I get very frustrated because they talk about the science of our bodies. And they talk about the chemicals and how they're released, and they talk about the electronic pulses in your brain and everything else. We are so much more than that, because you can dissect a dog and figure out all those same things happen in a dog, in a sparrow, in a pig. All those things happen. With all of this, we are much more than electronic pulses. We are much more than chemicals and hormones going through our body. We are God's point, specifically placed words and cadence and rhythm going through our soul, and that is from God and God only. That's what sets us apart. We are God's workmanship created in Christ. So not only are we formed by God, not only does he talk about our cadence and the words and the rhythm of who we are, he's also set us aside. We are born again in Christ, created in Christ. We have received the rebirth of Jesus Christ. We who put our faith in Christ are also created in Christ. This is the regeneration. This is the regeneration. We were dead to our old selves. We have a new purpose through Christ. If you know me, I'm a person of things. I love to touch things. The idea of a touchstone or a cornerstone To go to a museum and actually lay my hands on things of history is very, very important to me because I believe everything tells a story. Everything tells a story. And this is probably one of the most beautiful stories the Marine Corps has ever told. This right here. There's two stories in this. There's the story of the actual sword itself, this piece of metal. This actual piece of metal. But then there's also a story, it's familiar story, it's family story. What this thing has in common with all the other items that were built. This sword right here is actually the oldest weapon in the U.S. military armory. The oldest. This has still got a Marine Corps designation. It's the M1859. You've heard of the M911 or the 9 mil. The same kind of designation. But here's the beauty of this. This sword, this particular sword, started out as iron. Started out as just a lump of iron. It started out from the ground as iron ore. And if you've ever held iron ore, you can almost crush it in your hands. Iron ore gets taken and it gets broke down. And it gets smelted, and all the impurities are pulled out of that iron ore. And then what you have left is iron. But once you have iron, you're still not done with the process. You take this iron block and you give it to a swordsmith. And this swordsmith takes this iron block and he heats it up. He puts it in a fire, and this thing comes out glowing red. Block about this big. And he lays it out on the anvil as it's glowing red, and he starts hammering it, and he draws it out. Draws it out till it becomes the right length. And then he throws it back into the fire. But when he throws it back into the fire, he actually throws it up under the coals. And the purpose of this is he wants to get the carbon from the coals infused into the iron. And if you know anything about metalworking, the more carbon you have, the stronger that iron becomes because now it becomes steel. And so he goes through this process over and over and over again. And this iron is being stuffed in there in the coals, and it's being pulled out, and it's being drawn out. And then he folds it over and draws it out again. And then he folds it over, and you keep thinking, when's he going to stop folding it over? Because he's got it the right length. But every time he folds it over, he doubles the strength of this weapon. So we do this, and he goes through this whole process. And I asked myself, if I was that sword, do I think that this would be a fun thing to go through? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So he goes through this. And here's the amazing part about this. And this is where we correspond with this sword. Is we started getting into the design of this sword. Because once he's got the strength in the blade, he puts a very, very soft or very hard point on it. You can't deny what that point is for. It's not to carve a turkey. He puts a curve into the blade. And the blade is curved because there's more carbon in the cutting edge, which expands the leading edge. And the reason you have more carbon in the front edge is because you want a very sharp cutting edge. Slicing. And that's not a bologna sandwich. Even more so, they put a dent right in the middle of the blade. This is called the blood groove. It's the blood groove. And the reason being is because when you impale somebody with this, suction is created. And you have a hard time pulling the blade back out. So you put the blood groove in there so air can get into the wound and you can pull it out. This is pretty grotesque stuff, is it not? Is this not bad business? This sword was designed for death and destruction and most likely was going to face the same life. Because during this whole process, its blade was going to get dull, it was probably going to get broken, and even better yet, the design doesn't stop there because you also got your knuckle protectors. You got your pommel. This thing's designed, destined for death and destruction. But I can tell you this. Through the whole process, something happened to this sword. Something happened. It was pulled out of the armory with all the other swords. And in a process, they etched it. And when they etched it, they put United States Marine Corps, and you can see afterwards, come see me. There's the American flag, the eagle, globe, and anchor. And at the very bottom, this is really cool, it's the Star of David. At the bottom of it, it says proved. Proved means that this sword is approved by the Marine Corps. And we do not use this sword anymore for death and destruction. This sword now is used for ceremony, honor. Well, what does it represent? What does it represent? I can salute with it. Represents honor to my leaders. We can march. We can march in ceremonies for the burial of our fallen soldiers, our fallen Marines, sailors, and airmen. This sword now is set aside for honor. You will not come to my house and see my kids playing Ivanhoe in the front yard with this piece of gear. Instead of being stored in a box in an armory, waiting for the next war to break out, waiting for its chance of death and destruction, it's now hanging on a wall in a place of honor because it has been set aside, it has been marked for good work. It has been set aside for good work, for ceremony, for honor. And it's to honor those who came before us as U.S. Marines. It's to honor the blood that was shed. What an amazing story of something that was destined for destruction, destined to deal death, and now its whole purpose is honor. There is nothing that this piece of metal has done to rate it. This piece of metal has done nothing to rate this honor. It was pulled. It was pulled. He didn't raise his hand and say, hey, pick me, pick me, pick me. There was no battle that this piece of metal was in that we could say, hey, this sword was used by General Lee. This sword was used by a great officer in a battle. No. It's a simple piece of metal. And its whole purpose has been changed. Not for anything it's done, but for what the sword master did. Like this sword, our lives have been repurposed. Not in anything you've done. Let me put this away real quick here. Not by anything you've done. We are all in the forging process, are we not? Like this sword, we must remember that when we're talking about good works, good works is a result of our salvation, not the cause of our salvation. Once again, there's nothing that sword did that gained that mark on there. That sword is used in ceremony in honor because it has been given a place of honor. It's the same thing with us. It's the exact same thing. Any belief where a man believes his works will gain salvation is heresy. It is flat wrong. Do we honestly believe that we can do something that would gain our salvation through Christ? Because I'm sitting here thinking about it, the good deeds. I'm an elder here at church. I do good things all the time. In fact, the reason I get up in the morning is so I can lead this church. No, I get up in the morning so I can get a cup of coffee. Sometimes I get up in the morning so I can eat breakfast, so I can go to work. I yell at a couple of Marines, sign a couple of paperwork, come home, make a couple of phone calls. I love it. But the truth of the matter is most of what I do, 90% of what I do is just living. And there's another 10% where I do good deeds. But a lot of times those good deeds, they are what they are. They're a result. They're a result of what we're doing. They're a result of what I'm doing. They're a result of the journey that I am on right now. There is nothing that sword has done to gain its honor. I can't stress that enough. The honor was given to the sword. We should be working from a place of salvation, working down, instead of working through our good works up towards salvation. We've already got it. We've already got it. I said earlier, God has got a detail. In Matthew 10, verse 29, one of my most favorite passages. Are not two sparrows sold for a penny? And not one of them will fall to the ground apart from the will of our Father. Not one of them will fall apart from the will of your Father. Doesn't say the knowledge. Now I used to kind of believe that. God knows everything. Of course he knows. He's omnipotent, omnipresent. He knows everything. No. It's deeper than that. It's a whole lot deeper than that. God's not up here just watching us. He's a God of detail. And I'm telling you right now, if he knows, not only knows, but if a bird falls and he knows, it's more than knowing. If he knows the number of hairs on our head and he knows when they fall out, he is a God of detail. It is his will. And it is everything. If God wills the bird not to fall, it will not fall. He's not up there rolling the dice on what we should be doing like some kind of weird Dungeons and Dragons game to find out what the next move's going to be. There's no chance. We're not chemicals and we're not electronic signals. Our life is not the same thing. It's not by chance. I refuse to believe it. Romans 8:28, the one we've spoke about before when we were talking about hitting rock bottom. And we know that for all those who love God, all things will work together for the good of those who are called accordingly to his purpose. All things. See, but we got this figured out, right? Well, it's all things except for divorce, death, destruction. It's all things except for the trials that we face. It's all things except for the bad things because it's all talking about good things, right? No. It's all things, not some things, not good things. It's all things. Well, you say, how is that possible? How is that possible? How can divorce, which is usually born from some kind of sin, work for the good of God? Not a single sparrow will fall to the ground apart from the will of God. We have to believe in the divinity of God. He can do no wrong, and he can make anything right. So I ask these things, and what does this have to do with the process that we're in right now? God will not give us more than we can handle, and if he predestined us for good work, then he will prepare us for good work. As a kid, I loved the story of David. I loved the story of King David. In fact, even today, I'm telling you right now, the day I go to heaven, Jesus, thank you for your sacrifice. In fact, please forgive me because I don't fully comprehend the sacrifice that you've given to me. I really love you, and I'm glad to see you. Can I see King David? I love the story of David. And if you're familiar, David faced Goliath, right? And as David was facing Goliath, he felt called. You know he felt called because he opened his mouth. He walks out to the battlefield to take care of his brothers, to bring food to his brothers by his father's will. And as he goes out there, this Philistine, this giant, is out there calling toward God's people, making fun of them, making fun of their God. And David said, no way, I am not standing by. David's a small guy. David's not a big guy. And so David says, I ain't standing by. He's a man of action, right? I cannot let this voice in my soul be quenched. I'm saying something. How can we as God's people stand by? Have we not taken care of this before? Of course, King Saul hears this. He hears somebody who's got the bravado to do this. Well, come bring him here. Now David tells the king, he says, I'm a shepherd. God has prepared me for this. I have fought the bear. I have fought the lion. I have been prepared for this. I can go out there with confidence, right? Well, King Saul, with all of his knowledge and his wisdom, says, well, hey, this is a big giant. Here, let me hook you up. Here's my breastplate. And this would be like me and Paul going to battle. I can give him my flak jacket, right? I can give him my pack. I can give him my big gun. And he's going to be sitting here, and it's not going to fit. And Paul's going to realize real quick that, hey, I'm not used to this kind of gear anyways. So David is sitting there with this big helmet that's probably crooked on his face, right? He's got this shield that's probably going up to here. He's got this sword that's too big for him to handle. That is not the way that God set David up for success. The way God set David up for success is with a slingshot, his cloak, and a staff. Now, this slingshot, we're not talking about a little pea shooter here. We're talking about a pretty serious weapon. So I sit there and I think about this, right? David sticks to what he knows because he knows that God has trained him for this point in time. But the other thing about it is I always wondered this as a little kid, as my boy's age. Why did David pick 5 stones? Because the thing is, he always went and he grabbed these 5 stones. If David had true faith in God that he would be all right, he would only got 1 stone because we knew at the end of the story that's all he needed, right? That's because David didn't know the outcome. The will of God was secret. David did not know the outcome. What David did know is that the will of God will take place. That is what he knew. He had the calling once again to do something, to not sit still, not to keep his mouth shut, to not sit on his seat. He had no idea what the result was going to be. Maybe God's will for David that day was to be a martyr. David had no idea. David didn't know he was going to go out there and get it with 1 shot. Otherwise, he would have only got 1. He went out there with battle. He went out there with the tools and the abilities that God's already given him. So he goes out there in 1 shot, he takes care of David, or Goliath. And we know the rest is history. David comes on to become king. But God didn't just take a shepherd and throw him out there into the battle. God didn't just pull me off the streets and put me up here on stage. There are certain things that he has done in my life to bring me up to this point in time. There are certain things that he's done in each one of you. Good things, painful things. Because just like David with the bear and the lion, that was his job. It was to protect the sheep. You know, it's like a security guard at a bank. What's a bad day? When a bank robber gets there. God does not protect us from bad days. God may not protect us from bad days. And too many times we find ourselves in a situation where we become insubordinate. God, if you were the God of all gods, why did you let this bear into my flock? Don't you know how dangerous this is? Don't you know that these sheep are the most important thing to me? Why would you do this to me? Why would you do this to me? Because God was preparing them for something bigger. Each and every single one of you have faced your bears and your lions. Every day. Rejoice in it. Rejoice in it. Because there is a will for you. And it may be secret and it's none of our business to ask. But if you put your faith in God, that you know what he has designed for you is going to take place, it's a whole lot easier to push through. And then you know what kind of prayers to pray. Dear God, be with me, make me stronger through this process, and your will be done. There's nothing wrong with wishing something would pass. But rejoice when they don't. Because he's preparing each one of you. Every single one of you in this room, he's preparing. He's calling, and you need to listen to this. Because this is where we're at right now. This is where we're at right now. We've got this church, and there's needs to be met. There's holes to be filled. And each one of you are being called toward a certain ministry, and you don't know what that is yet. You got to be still and know that he is God, first of all. And understand the will and listen to his calling. I will tell you one of the things that we have to do is we have to understand what we're built for. Like the parking lot out here. We got different vehicles out here, right? And vehicles are designed for different things. And how foolish is it for a pickup truck to go, man, I sure wish I could go 200 miles an hour. And how stupid is it for a Corvette to sit there and say, I sure wish I could pull a load like that truck over there. This is not about knowing your limitations. It's not about knowing your limitations. It's about knowing the way God's built you. David knew that he wasn't designed to go fight that Goliath as a soldier. That's why he pulled all the armor off. I'm not designed for this. God didn't prepare me for this. I love football. Another analogy. How are you going to have a successful team if the quarterback wants to be a linebacker? And that's all he does. He pines his day wishing he was a linebacker. I should have wished I was a linebacker. Or better yet, if the quarterback wants to be a spectator and watch the game from the stands. I'll tell you right now that when I was in high school, I never once played quarterback. Could you imagine that? It's because my coach was smart enough to know that I wasn't designed for these things. But the most important thing that we got right now, folks, is you need to be still and you need to know that he is God and he has a will for you. And when you're still and you want to follow his known will, the will that we have from him in the Bible, then you will fall under his unknown will for you. And then you will fall in the same position that David was in, to where you will be victorious no matter what, because it's his will. The Baptism Sunday, it's a great thing. It's a great thing. It's an awesome thing. Today is the day where you will receive the public marking that you've already received before. Your spirit has already received. Today is the day where you say, I publicly am going to be used for honor, for ceremony. No longer does my life revolve around death and destruction. As we wrap things up here, we talked about a calling today. And right now, there are many of you, some of you, who may feel the calling right now, that today's the day where you want to put on Christ. Today's the day where you want to publicly say, I want to be a child of God. I encourage anybody who has this calling to meet Paul in the back. If they desire to do this today, of which we're preparing to do right now as Baptismal Sunday, I invite you to do that. Be still and know that he is God, and hear the calling.